From tavern revelry to the battlefield, a rebellious prince must choose between a life of pleasure and the heavy crown of England. Welcome to the rollicking and profound world of Henry IV, Part 1.
Hi there. Today we're really diving deep into one of William Shakespeare's, well, probably one of his most celebrated history plays, Henry IV, Part 1. It's just a work that has captivated audiences for centuries, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
It's renowned for these incredibly vivid characters, especially the unforgettable Sir John Falstaff, and its really compelling, almost epic narrative of Prince Hal's dramatic journey, from this reckless youth to becoming a figure capable of kingship.
And it's not just a standalone play, compelling as it is on its own. It's actually a core piece of what scholars call Shakespeare's second tetralogy. That's this monumental sequence of plays, starting with Richard II, going through Henry IV, Part 1 and Part 2, and wrapping up with Henry V. And many people consider this series to be among Shakespeare's most profoundly human plays. Why do you think that is? What is it about this tetralogy and Henry IV, Part 1 in particular, that makes it resonate so much?
That's a really great question, and I think it gets right to the heart of why it's lasted so long.
Yeah.
I think it's because this particular series masterfully blends the really high stakes of tragedy we're talking about.
Yeah.
Characters fighting for thrones, facing treason, risking death.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, really serious stuff. But it blends that with these surprising and, frankly, often delightful moments of genuine comedy and wit. Unlike some of Shakespeare's plays that are just tragedy or just comedy. These ones give you the full spectrum of human experience. You get intense political maneuvering, deep thoughts on duty and power, and then bam, a burst of hilarious wordplay or a moment of personal struggle that feels, well, incredibly relatable. It just mirrors the messy, contradictory nature of real life, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Like how life can throw intense drama and, absurd comedy into the very same scene sometimes. So our mission today is to really unpack the core plot of Henry IV, Part 1. We want to delve into the major characters, try to understand their motivations, their psychological complexities. We'll explore the profound themes Shakespeare is grappling with here. What is true kingship? What about the many faces of honor? The weight of responsibility, the tricky path to political legitimacy.
Oh, huge themes.
Huge. And ultimately, we want to discover how this play, written way back in the 16th century, continues to speak so powerfully to human nature and the very real challenges we still face today. Things like coming of age, grappling with leadership burdens, or even just figuring out who we want to be. So yeah, let's start our journey into this rich, complex world.
Okay, so let's untack this. The play opens, and it's not with, like, a triumphant king on a secure throne. It's a kingdom in deep disarray, ruled by a king who is anything but secure. King Henry IV, the monarch at the center of it all, is described as shaken, one with care.
Yeah.
He's clearly struggling to keep control of this fractured realm. He's a man carrying a heavy burden, restless, can't even sleep properly.
You can feel his anxiety just radiating from that very first scene. And his discomfort, it isn't just about the immediate politics of the moment, it's tied directly to his past actions, how he got the throne. Right, the usurpation.
Exactly. He didn't inherit it through a clear line.
Yeah.
He took it by deposing his cousin, Richard II. And the play consistently suggests that his reign is plagued by all this internal unrest, precisely because of that usurpation. It's almost like the kingdom itself is suffering from this sin, this disruption of what they saw as the divine order of succession.
That idea of a disrupted natural or divine order hanging over everything, that feels absolutely crucial to understanding Henry's own internal struggle and, well, the chaos erupting around him.
It really is. It casts this long shadow over his entire rule. You really feel that weight on him from the very beginning. He actually yearns for peace. He even dreams of leading a crusade to the Holy Land.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? Maybe it's a way for him to atone for deposing Richard, purify his soul,
Yeah.
or maybe even a way to unify his fractured kingdom by pointing all that internal conflict outwards.
Could be both. But England is just too consumed by new broils, these constant rebellions, internal fights for any kind of grand unifying gesture like that. The internal wounds are just too fresh, too deep.
The irony is just palpable, isn't it? His desire for peace is constantly blocked by the very instability that his own rise to power kind of kicked off.
Indeed. And it's not just this idea of divine order that's disrupted. The very structure of 15th century English society plays a huge role in this instability. What historians sometimes call bastard feudalism is a key piece of this puzzle.
Bastard feudalism. How did that work exactly?
Well, unlike this sort of earlier, maybe more direct feudal system where lords owed allegiance straight to the king,
Hmm.
this newer form allowed powerful nobles to raise their own private armies. They accumulated immense wealth and regional influence.
So it wasn't just that they could raise armies, but these armies felt their main loyalty was to their local lord, not necessarily the king way off in London.
Exactly right. The loyalty became much more personal, tied to money, local power, rather than just loyalty to the crown itself. And this allowed figures like the Percys, who we absolutely need to talk about, to command retinues,
Hmm.
groups of armed followers that could seriously rival the king's own forces. Yeah, so this structure meant that these powerful figures could always pose a constant, real challenge to the king's authority. Even if things seemed stable for a bit, these private armies could be quickly mobilized if the nobles felt slighted or saw an opportunity. It fundamentally shifted the power balance away from a strong central monarchy, making the kingdom inherently vulnerable to these big noble families.
Which brings us neatly to the very real, immediate threat to Henry's throne, the rise of the rebels. This is where the politics really heat up and the play's main conflict ignites. And the central figures in this brewing rebellion are the incredibly powerful Percy family.
The Percys, you've got the Earl of Northumberland, his quite shrewd brother Worcester, and Northumberland's famously hot-headed son, Henry Percy, better known as Hotspur. Now, these guys were actually crucial in helping Henry IV grab the crown from Richard II in the first place.
They were his allies.
They were his key allies, yeah. They brought him into power. But now they feel profoundly unrewarded for what they did. They feel increasingly unhappy with Henry's rule. They think they were promised more, that their sacrifices weren't properly recognized.
A classic case of expectations not being met after a regime change.
Pretty much, this
Yeah.
sense of grievance just boils over, and they hatch this incredibly audacious plot. Basically, depose Henry and carve up England amongst themselves and their allies.
Yeah.
The plan is quite ambitious, really. They want Edmund Mortimer, who happens to be Hotspur's brother-in-law, on the throne. Wales would go to Owen Glendower, and the north of England would go to Northumberland.
It's a massive gamble. And Hotspur himself is such a magnetic character, isn't he? He's just pure fiery energy, impetuous, almost reckless sometimes. Shakespeare calls him a sprightly Scot of Scots, though he's English, that's more about his fighting spirit, and depicts him as so incredibly brave, almost supernaturally skilled, that he's rumored to kill a sparrow flying with a pistol. You can just picture the swagger. And his wife, Lady Percy, who he calls Kate, she gives us some really important insight into him. She kind of laments his all-consuming obsession with war and glory. She observes his spirit is so at war that it leaves him no peace. She says he even murmurs tales of iron wars in his sleep and cries out, "Courage to the field."
Yeah, she shows the personal cost, doesn't she? His single-minded focus on this idea of martial honor. He embodies that traditional chivalric ideal, almost to an extreme, valuing reputation, glory above everything else, even his own well-being or his marriage, perhaps.
He's consumed by it.
Completely. And his uncle, Worcester, is such a stark contrast. He's the colder, more cunning, manipulative strategist in the family. He actively uses Hotspur's hot-headedness. He even deliberately keeps a royal pardon offer from Hotspur later on,
Yeah.
knowing Hotspur's pride won't let him back down once he's committed.
That's cold.
It is. Worcester believes, quite cynically, that King Henry will always find a reason to punish this offense in other faults. He thinks a real reconciliation with Henry is just impossible. His logic is basically, Henry got the throne by force, so he'll always be suspicious of the powerful men who helped him get there. That suspicion will eventually lead to punishment, so why not strike first? Why not push for outright rebellion now?
Wow, that's a very Machiavellian calculation, isn't it? Using Hotspur's impulsiveness for his own strategic endgame. And then we have Owen Glendower, the Welsh leader. He's described almost as a mystic. He leads a really formidable rebellion in Wales.
Yeah, Glendower is presented as this powerful, almost supernatural figure. He was a strong supporter of Richard II, which naturally puts him against Henry IV. He claims that when he was born, the earth actually shook like a coward, and the front of heaven was full of fiery shapes.
So he sees himself as marked by destiny.
Definitely. It gives him this aura of mystical power and legitimacy among his followers, making him a really formidable leader. He thinks he's chosen, basically.
And the interactions between him and Hotspur are brilliant. Hotspur, this blunt, pragmatic warrior, just has zero patience for Glendower's mystical pronouncements. It creates some genuinely funny moments right in the middle of all this high-stakes politics.
Oh, yeah. Like when Glendower grandly says the earth shook at his birth, and Hotspur just shoots back that it would have shaken anyway if your mother's cat had but kittened, though yourself had never been born.
Aha. Perfect Hotspur. Just totally irreverent.
It shows Hotspur's bluntness and maybe Glendower's slightly inflated sense of self-importance. So, rounding out this rebel alliance, you also have Edmund Mortimer. He's a key figure because, to some, he's seen as the legitimate heir to the throne, not Henry IV.
How does that claim work?
His claim comes through Lionel, Duke of Clarence, who was an older son of Edward III than Henry V's father, John of Gaunt. So by strict primogeniture, some argued Mortimer's claim was stronger. Hotspur is fiercely loyal to Mortimer and defends him passionately against the king's accusations of treason. He sees Mortimer as a wronged hero.
Got it. And finally, joining this dangerous group is Archibald, the Earl of Douglas, the fierce leader of the Scottish rebels. He's known for his high deeds and military skill, a really feared warrior.
So you end up with this incredibly powerful, diverse coalition forming against King Henry. They're threatening to just tear the kingdom apart. It's like a powder keg, really, just waiting for a spark.
So while the kingdom is basically teetering on the edge of civil war, King Henry's son, Prince Hal, the heir to the throne, is completely MIA from court. Instead of doing his royal duties, he's apparently just wasting his youth in London's taverns. The most famous one is a Boar's Head in Eastcheap.
Yep.
He's hanging out with this merry, but let's be honest, pretty disreputable band of rogues. That's where you find him, not helping his dad deal with the Percys.
And his number one companion, and honestly one of Shakespeare's absolute greatest creations, is Sir John Falstaff. He is a knight, technically, but one who is, as Hal himself puts it, fat-witted with drinking of old sack. Sack being a type of wine.
Right.
Falstaff is just larger than life. He's known for his, robust body humor, his sort of good-natured rascality, his incredible boasting, but also, his drunkenness, his slipperiness, his duplicity, and of course his famously enormous physique. He's the embodiment of pleasure, indulgence, and, well, clever dodging of responsibility.
He really is. He practically leaps off the page, doesn't he? And his crew, Ned Poins, Bardolph with his famously red nose, Peto, even the hostess of the tavern, Mistress Squitley, this create this incredibly vibrant world, a backdrop to Hal's seeming idleness. Their banter is just brilliant, full of quick wit, puns, wordplay, and a lot of just raucous fun.
Yeah, the energy in those tavern scenes is amazing.
And one of the most famous moments, which really captures the dynamic between Hal and Falstaff perfectly, is the Gad's Hill robbery.
Ah, yes, the Gad's Hill robbery. Classic Falstaff. So in this scene, Hal and Poins basically set Falstaff and his cronies up. They let them successfully rob some travelers on Gad's Hill, but then Hal and Poins, disguised, jump out and rob Falstaff and the others of their loot just moments later.
Leaving Falstaff completely terrified and empty-handed.
Exactly. And when Hal and Poins confront him back at the tavern, it just hilariously exposes Falstaff's utter cowardice. He tells these ridiculously exaggerated stories about bravely fighting off 11 buckram men dressed in coarse cloth, when in reality there were only 2 attackers, Hal and Poins, and Falstaff ran away almost immediately.
And he doesn't even back down when they call him out on the lie. His defense is pure Falstaffian logic. The lion will not touch the true prince. Instinct is a great matter. I was now a coward on instinct.
Haha. It's brilliant, isn't it? He turns his cowardice into some kind of royal sixth sense. He's a master of spin, turning any situation, even his own shameful actions, somehow to his advantage, or at least trying to talk his way out of it.
He absolutely is. But here's the thing, what's really crucial about this whole Eastcheap world and Hal's deep involvement in it. It's revealed quite early in the play in a really key soliloquy by Prince Hal himself. This is the moment that completely reframes everything we thought we knew about him.
Yes, this is huge. He's alone on stage, and he says, "I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness, yet herein will I imitate the sun." He basically tells the audience he sees through his companions, he knows they're idle, but he's going to hang out with them for a while.
So what does this actually mean for how we see Prince Hal? It means he's not just some prodigal son who suddenly sees the light and changes his ways. No, he's a master strategist. He's almost an actor, a protean prince, meaning he can change shape, change his persona, who intentionally assumes and discards guises at will.
Right.
He deliberately creates this wild, irresponsible image. Why? So that when he finally does shed it and embraces his royal duties, his transformation will glitter o'er my fault and attract more eyes than if he'd just been good and dutiful all along. He literally says he will falsify men's hopes by surprising everyone and being better than they ever expected. It's a calculated, meticulously planned performance of reformation.
That is such a critical insight into his character. It paints him as this really cunning, almost Machiavellian prince, Someone who gets that political power isn't just about inheriting a title, it's about managing public perception, controlling the narrative. He understands the importance of appearing good, even while being perfectly capable of being bad, or at least appearing bad when it serves his purpose.
So his time with Falstaff and the others, it's not just youthful rebellion.
Not entirely, no.
Yeah.
It's more like a calculated strategic apprenticeship. Think of it as like a street-level education in kingship.
A kind of real-world MBA in leadership, but conducted in taverns.
Exactly. It lets him learn about all these different parts of society from, well, a safe distance. He's not just drinking and joking. He's observing. He's learning the language of the common people, understanding their humor, their grievances, their loyalties, skills that will be absolutely vital for a successful king, skills his own rather isolated father, Henry IV, never really acquired.
He's getting intelligence, basically, understanding the people he'll eventually rule.
Precisely. That safe distance lets him see power dynamics from the ground up. It gives him this incredible understanding of his future subjects, way beyond what any court tutor could ever teach him. He's gathering intel, learning how to connect, how to manipulate, maybe.
And you see his manipulative skill, his theatrical side, really shine in one of the play's most amazing scenes, the mock interrogation. This is where he and Falstaff basically role-play a confrontation between King Henry V and Prince Hal. They take turns playing father and son.
Oh, it's an incredible scene for revealing character.
Yeah.
Falstaff gets to play the king first, and he pompously criticizes Hal's low-life companions, while, of course, ironically praising this goodly, portly man, meaning himself, as virtuous and a worthy companion for the prince.
He can't resist, can he?
Never. He says something like, "There is a thing, Harry, known by the name of pitch. His pitch doth defile. So doth the company thou keepest. And yet there's a virtuous man whom I've often noted in thy company, but I know not his name." Then he goes on to describe himself in glowing terms. It's hilarious self-praise.
Total Falstaff. But then Hal takes on the king's role, and the mood just shifts completely, doesn't it? He drops the joking persona, and he unleashes this devastating barrage of insults at Falstaff. It's a really cutting verbal attack that shows the underlying judgment, maybe even contempt, and the conscious distance Hal maintains.
It's brutal.
He calls him that trunk of humors, that bolting hutch of beastliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack, that stuffed cloak bag of guts, that roasted Manningtree ox, that reverend vice, that gray iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years. It's just relentless, and it really hints at what's coming.
And Falstaff's famous response to this, his desperate, almost heartbreaking plea is, "Banish plump Jack and banish all the world." He's basically saying, if you get rid of me, you get rid of all joy, all life.
It's quite moving in its way.
It is. But Hal's reply is just ice cold. It's prescient, chilling. "I do. I will." This line is incredibly important because it explicitly foreshadows that really painful public rejection of Falstaff that happens right at the end of Henry IV Part 2. It's the moment Hal fully, consciously embraces his royal identity and accepts the harsh realities of power that come with the crown. The personal cost of kingship is right there, sacrificing personal affection for public duty.
That moment with Falstaff, that "I do, I will," really shifts our focus to another massive theme running through this play, the whole idea of honor. And it raises a big question, what actually is honor in Henry IV Part 1? Because Shakespeare doesn't give us just one answer. He explores it through these really stark, fascinating contrasts. He presents, like 3 distinct perspectives on what it means to be honorable, almost inviting us to compare them.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, he sets up these contrasting models. First, you've got Hotspur. As we've kind of touched on, he embodies that traditional chivalric honor almost to a fault. For Hotspur, honor is everything. It's about battlefield courage. It's about building a gleaming reputation through heroic deeds. And ultimately, if it comes to it, achieving a glorious death in battle.
He wants fame that lasts forever.
Exactly. He explicitly seeks never-dying honor. He sees life as short and thinks it's best spent doing great deeds, even if it means challenging kings to tread on kings, as he says. His honor isn't some quiet internal virtue. It has to be publicly acquired and publicly displayed. It's all about martial prowess, daring actions, winning renown. He lives for the applause, the legend.
It's entirely about that external validation, isn't it? That public perception. He seems almost addicted to the idea of glory. And then you swing to the complete opposite end of the spectrum with Falstaff. He presents this radically different, you could say, anti-heroic view of honor.
Totally anti-heroic.
And it's most famously laid out in his Honor Catechism, Soliloquy. He delivers this right on the battlefield, surrounded by the dead and dying, which makes his words even more cynical and yet Somehow weirdly logical.
It's one of the most memorable speeches in all of Shakespeare, I think. Falstaff is literally standing there facing battle, and he starts questioning this abstract concept, honor. He asks himself, honor pricks me on. Yea, but how if honor prick me off when I come on? How then? Meaning, what if honor gets me killed?
Yeah.
Can honor set to a leg? No. Or an arm? No. Michael, what is honor? A word. What is in that word honor? What is that honor? Air. Just air. A trim reckoning. Therefore, all none of it. Honor is a mere scutcheon. Scutcheon being like a coat of arms on a tomb, something for the dead.
It's so blunt, so cynical, but also undeniably practical, isn't it, from his point of view? For Falstaff, survival, or as he famously coins the phrase later, the better part of valor is discretion, survival absolutely outweighs any abstract idea of glory or reputation. His life, his body, it's just too precious to throw away for a mere word.
Absolutely. And he lives by that philosophy. He famously pretends to be dead on the battlefield at Shrewsbury to avoid being killed by Douglas. And then, with unbelievable nerve, he gets up later and claims he killed the already dead Hotspur himself to try and get the credit.
Incredible audacity.
Right. And it's worth underlining Shakespeare actually coined the phrase, discretion is the better part of valor, for Falstaff, right here in this play. It's amazing how that line has just entered everyday language.
It really is. It shows Falstaff's enduring wit, I suppose, but also his profound, if totally self-serving, philosophy. But it really throws that contrast into sharp relief, the traditional hero versus the ultimate anti-hero. It forces you, the audience, to question what heroism even means.
Definitely. So you've got Hotspur at one pole, Falstaff at the other, and then Prince Hal's idea of honor seems to land somewhere in the middle, kind of blending elements of both in this very strategic, very calculated way. He doesn't just dismiss honor like Falstaff does, but he's also not consumed by it, not driven to recklessness by it like Hotspur is.
He seems to get the value of appearing honorable, maybe. Not just for personal glory like Hotspur, but for political legitimacy.
Yeah.
He needs to look the part of a worthy future king.
Exactly. He clearly has some of Falstaff's pragmatism, that calculation he's not going to die needlessly. But he recognizes that a king needs to appear honorable, needs to seem courageous, to secure the throne and win the loyalty of his people. He makes that promise to his father. I shall redeem all this on Percy's head.
Right.
And his big climactic victory over Hotspur at the Battle of Shrewsbury, that's the ultimate proof of his reformation. It's the dramatic moment where he sheds that tavern dweller image and steps fully into his royal destiny.
It's his big performance piece.
It really is. It's a great enterprise, as the play calls it, that showcases his military skill, proves his courage, and helps solidify his claim to the throne. He shows he can be a valiant warrior when he needs to be, unlike Falstaff. But he's also not blindly chasing honor into an early grave like Hotspur. It's this carefully balanced approach that serves his ambition to be a successful, legitimate king. He understands honor almost as a tool, a necessary part of effective leadership, rather than either an all-consuming ideal or a completely meaningless word. He's shaping a new, more pragmatic kind of kingship, one that we'll see fully developed in Henry V.
So if we try and connect all these threads, pull back to the bigger picture, Henry IV, Part 1 feels fundamentally about one of the most universal human experiences, that really challenging journey from youth to responsibility. It's literally the making of a king, right? A transformation played out on this huge public stage.
Absolutely. Hal's journey from this seemingly wild rogue prince to a responsible heir apparent, it really reflects a timeless coming-of-age story. He learns not just about war and politics at court, but crucially, as we said, he learns about the common people from his time in Eastcheap. He observes the way power works, both in the rough-and-tumble tavern world and in the high-stakes court. And he comes to understand, maybe better than anyone else in the play, the huge personal sacrifices that real leadership demands.
He has to shed that comfortable, irresponsible skin of his youth for the heavy, uncomfortable mantle of duty.
That's a good way to put it. And his eventual rejection of Falstaff, which, let's face it, feels painful for us, the audience, and certainly must have been for Falstaff.
Devastating for Falstaff.
Devastating. But it symbolizes his complete acceptance of his royal identity. It's presented as a necessary, even if harsh, break from his past self. He literally has to banish his former life, his former friends, to fully embrace his duty, his commitment to this new role as king. It's this profound moment of personal transformation, signaling he's ready now to put the crown before any personal attachments.
The play also paints such a vivid picture of the sheer burden of leadership, doesn't it? We see it so clearly in King Henry IV himself, his physical exhaustion, his emotional turmoil, his inability to sleep. He's a king who is quite literally being eaten away by the crown he fought so hard to get.
Yet, he carries the weight of his past actions, the usurpation, every single day. And that theme gets echoed later in Henry V, even though it's the next play. Hal himself, now King Henry V, struggles with that loss of infinite heart's ease that kings apparently have to give up. He suffers from his father's sleeplessness, too, and feels his life is reduced to this empty ceremonial role sometimes. It really shines a light on the tremendous personal, psychological cost of ruling. It suggests the crown, yeah, it brings power, but it's also kind of a cage.
It's a powerful insight that the crown is heavy, literally and figuratively. It weighs on the soul. And the contrasting relationships Hal has with Falstaff on one hand, his actual father on the other, they really highlight how much our companions can influence our personal growth and also our public image. He's pulled in such different directions by these two quite flawed father figures.
They certainly are flawed, and they pull him differently. Falstaff pulls him towards pleasure, indulgence, living in the moment, the common life maybe, while his father constantly pushes him towards duty, discipline, the responsibilities of kingship. The play really reminds us that identity isn't some fixed thing. It's constantly being shaped by the choices we make, the relationships we have, and the roles we find ourselves having to play, especially when we step into positions of authority or responsibility. It's this dynamic, ongoing process of defining ourselves.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how Shakespeare uses what scholars often call the theatrical metaphor throughout the play. This idea that the social world is like a theater and human behavior is basically role-playing. Hal seems like the ultimate player in this sense, doesn't he? He's consciously orchestrating his own transformation, managing his public image, almost like he's the director of his own life's drama.
That concept, the world as a stage, was actually quite commonplace in Elizabethan England. But it still resonates so powerfully today, doesn't it? When we think about public personas, about performance and leadership, we see politicians, celebrities, even business leaders carefully crafting their images all the time. Hal's very self-aware manipulation of his own image feels like a brilliant early exploration of exactly that. He's not just growing up, he's actively performing his growth for maximum political impact.
It really makes you question how much of our own true selves we actually reveal or maybe even suppress when we step into different roles in our lives.
Exactly. It's a reminder that maybe authenticity, especially in public life, is often a very carefully managed performance itself.
Yeah.
Hashtag tag outro.
So in this deep dive, we've really explored how Henry IV, Part 1, just masterfully weaves together all these threads: political intrigue, profound personal transformation, and these sharply contrasting ideas about what honor even means. It's a play that really challenges us, I think, to consider what true leadership actually involves. Is it the fiery, almost self-destructive courage of Hotspur?
Mm.
Is it the pragmatic, cynical self-interest of Falstaff, just looking out for number one? Or is it the calculated, disciplined rise of Prince Hal, who ultimately learns to blend the necessary virtues and maybe vices required to rule effectively?
The play's lessons feel incredibly enduring, don't they? Lessons about the sacrifices that greatness seems to demand, that constant tension between what we want personally, what public duty requires, and just the often painful, complicated process of growing up. They feel as relevant today as they must have back in Shakespeare's time. It offers this timeless look at identity, ambition, and the sheer complexity of the human condition.
It really does. It reminds us that leadership isn't just about having power. It often comes with a profound personal cost. And it leaves us, maybe, with a truly provocative thought to mull over. In our own lives, when we're called to step up, maybe into leadership, whether that's in our family, our community, our job, or just any demanding new role, how much of our previous self, our plump jack maybe, do we feel we have to banish to meet the expectations of that new crown, whether the crown is literal or metaphorical? And what's the real cost of that transformation, not just for us, but maybe for those companions, those parts of our past that we feel we have to leave behind?
That's a powerful question to end on. What is the cost?
It really is something worth pondering long after the curtain falls on this magnificent play.